Here's a video showing me being a failure, even after a long period of time. For some context, I recorded two videos where I had an agenda that felt like it should have been relatively simple, but virtually nothing ended up being successful. I'll show some actual footage, but I want to set the context first. The first video is about 8 hours long, and I failed the first task, succeeded with the second task with some caveats, failed the third, fourth, fifth, and ended up skipping the last two things altogether. Man, I'm a failure, even after 8 hours of doing these things. I want to remind you it took even longer since there were jump cuts and breaks. This is also after spending several hours setting everything up and troubleshooting all these problems I ran into getting all the equipment working. In the second video, I came back to most of these things being more prepared this time. This one was 9 hours long, so keep that in mind. I added a new task, failed that. The second task was also new, and I succeeded with that one only because I'd done it before, but my video didn't save properly, so the success wasn't even properly recorded. The other tasks are second attempts from before. The third thing failed again. The fourth thing succeeded, but kind of anticlimactically. With the fifth thing, I had three completely different plans in case one of them didn't work, and every single one of them failed. The sixth thing, I ended up skipping that again, and I succeeded with the seventh thing because I was just showing something that already existed, but some demonstrations failed within that, of course. 17 hours later with both videos, which was much longer, I still failed most of the things I tried. Here's a rundown of everything actually happening. Remember, the amount of time I say this took was based on how long it took in the video, not factoring in jump cuts or breaks or setup time, so it may have actually taken a lot longer than that. My first task took about an hour and 34 minutes in the video, and it was a total failure. The host does not have enough CPUs. I was hoping to pool resources from this. There might be a way, but I'm not going to figure it out tonight, so I'm not going to do that. The second task was technically successful with a caveat. I got my original mission accomplished, but failed the original approach I was trying. I failed my original approach, but that wasn't the correct one anyway. The third task was a failure, which took about an hour and 12 minutes. Yeah, I'm not seeing a Wi-Fi. I was hoping to switch this over to Wi-Fi, but that doesn't look like it's going to be possible. Well, I think I'm probably going to call it a night. The fourth task was a failure too. It took 30 minutes before I gave up on that. I don't know how to compile stuff, so I think I'm going to have to do this later. I'm going to forget about this. Considering how late it is, I think I'd rather not do this right now, so let's just come back to here. The fifth task was something I'd never done before. It took an hour and 26 minutes and was a failure, of course. I'm not going to screw around with this right now. I may have to do something different with firmware. The last two things I ended up skipping altogether, as I've now recorded 8 hours of content over 3 days. The total time spent on failures, not including what I skipped, is about 4 hours and 42 minutes of total constant failure. So now we're talking about the next video where I try coming back to these things. The first task took about 2 hours and 47 minutes, and I ended up failing after all that. This new task wasn't originally going to happen at all. That can't be done. So as long as that's the case, then I'm just going to forget about this. We're done with this finally. Those who've been waiting for it, it is finally here. The second task succeeded, but my video didn't correctly save to disk, so I effectively lost hours of footage, and that was a failure. I do mean hours, that's not an exaggeration. It was about 3 hours and 6 minutes of frozen video, and I had no idea that entire time. The audio works, but the video only updates once every 5 minutes or so. It's unwatchable. The computer was probably bogged down from resource intensiveness, It was a fairly high-end computer too, so that's the last thing I would expect from an Intel Core i9 and an AMD Radeon 5600. Also, my OBS preview looked perfectly fine and I was getting a full 60 FPS, so I have no idea why this was happening. Here's a lesson that the OBS preview may not always be telling the truth about what's happening. My third task was the fourth task from the previous video, and I still failed 13 minutes later, where I previously failed 30 minutes later on that same task. Oh man. Well, that's not important. Alright, we screwed it up and it doesn't matter at this point. So let's just move on to the next thing. My fourth task was coming back to my prior fourth task. I had 3 different approaches planned this time in case one of them didn't work, and every single plan failed. All the plans involved virtualization. The first plan failed after 2 hours and 20 minutes of trying. I'm gonna forget about it. I thought it would be a really cool use for pfSense, being able to create with a router, it's obviously easy, but I don't think OpenSense would be any different, would it? I don't happen to have that, so I'm certainly not going to test it tonight. It's getting pretty late. I would rather wrap it up pretty soon. The second plan failed 42 minutes later. Well, I'll just do it on Debian once. I'm going to have to learn how to do that eventually and actually learn how to do it for real. The third plan also failed 42 minutes later as well. I'll look into this on my own time, honestly. I was pretty sure it wasn't going to work. I should have created a snapshot so that I could easily undo all this. I think it'll still work with Ethernet, just not Wi-Fi. I think the third plan would work if I spent more time on it, but I gave up for the night. That's another 3 hours and 46 minutes with all those failed approaches combined for this particular task. My last task succeeded, but there were some minor demonstrations that kind of went wrong, as I mentioned before. Out of this 9-hour video, I still managed to fail just about everything with about 6 hours and 46 minutes of constant failure. I'm a total failure and it's embarrassing. It's nice to get this weight off my shoulders though, so thanks for listening and letting me vent about this meaningless bullcrap that nobody asked about. Okay, bye.